The mockery begins. Hook, 5 to 7 minutes. The Galactic Empire sat high in its throne room, surrounded by alien generals and officials. Their eyes were sharp, calculating, always watching for weakness in other species. It was a room filled with power, yet today they focused on something they thought was beneath them, a single human ship. The grand, metallic doors opened, and Commander Jackson stood before the council, bringing with him the news they had waited for. Humanity had sent a ship into the galaxy. But this wasn't just any ship. It was the Dreadnought, the pride of Earth's military. The Empire didn't think much of it at first. The Dreadnought was, after all, just one ship. The humans had no real experience in warfare. How could they? Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. The Empire had wiped out countless species in their time, and the humans were no different. What could one ship possibly do? "Look at this," General Xarn, a towering insectoid alien, sneered. He slapped a hologram of the Dreadnought onto the table. The ship looked massive compared to human technology, but it was nothing compared to the Empire's fleets. The generals laughed. Their voices echoed throughout the room, making it clear that they saw this as nothing more than a joke. A ship like that? It won't even make it past our outer defenses. The humans are just playing pretend, said Commander Lyric, a cold and calculating reptilian officer. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking bored. The hologram showed the Dreadnought slowly traveling through space, moving closer to the heart of the Empire's territory. There was no sign of anything dangerous, nothing that indicated it was a threat. It was, in their eyes, just another spaceship. But Commander Jackson was not foolish. He had been chosen to lead this mission because he understood something that the Empire didn't. The Dreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol. It was humanity's warning to the galaxy. The Empire's commanders continued to mock the ship. "What are they going to do? Fire rocks at us. Their weapons are nothing compared to the power we hold," General Xarn chuckled. As the meeting went on, Commander Jackson felt the weight of their words. His people had suffered. Earth had been destroyed years ago, ravaged by the greed of the Empire. Now, the Dreadnought was humanity's final stand. This ship carried the memories of a world lost, the dreams of billions who had perished. If the Dreadnought failed, humanity would truly be finished. But Jackson was sure it wouldn't fail. He stood tall, despite the mockery. The Dreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was the culmination of everything humanity had worked for in the face of their destruction. He didn't need to prove anything to the Empire. They would see for themselves what the ship could do. Meanwhile, on the Dreadnought, Jackson's crew prepared. They weren't afraid, but they knew the odds were against them. The Empire had far more ships, more firepower, and more experience, but they had something the Empire didn't: a will to survive. That was something no alien race could measure. "Captain," a voice called out to Jackson as he stood on the bridge. It was Lieutenant Murrah, his second in command. "We're ready to engage. The Empire's fleet is in our sights." Jackson nodded, his eyes narrowing. He turned to face the massive window that looked out into the blackness of space. The Empire's fleet loomed in the distance, an intimidating sight. They were not afraid. They were angry, furious at being mocked for their technology, for their desperation. The crew felt it too. Every one of them had a reason to fight, a reason to stand tall against the might of the Empire. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revenge. The Dreadnought had been built for this moment. It wasn't just a ship. It was humanity's answer to the Empire's cruelty. It wasn't just about weapons or shields. It was a statement. And humanity was about to make that statement loud and clear. On the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Empire continued to mock the humans. They didn't know the storm that was coming. They didn't realize that the ship they laughed at was about to turn their empire upside down. But Commander Jackson knew. He could feel it. The Dreadnought was ready, and it would make sure the galaxy never underestimated humanity again. As the ship's engines roared to life, Jackson gave the command, "Prepare for battle." The crew responded, their hands moving swiftly over the controls. The Dreadnought surged forward, heading straight toward the Empire's fleet. In that moment, as the ship moved closer to its target, something clicked in Jackson's mind. The Empire had underestimated humanity's strength, and that would be their downfall. The Dreadnought wasn't just big, it was powerful. And soon, the galaxy would know what humanity was capable of. Suspense. The Empire had no idea what was coming. Would the Dreadnought really be able to match their might? Or would humanity's last hope be destroyed before it even had a chance? This is the hook that sets the stage for the rest of the story. The audience is introduced to the powerful tension between the Galactic Empire's mockery and humanity's silent resolve. The suspense lies in whether the Dreadnought will be able to prove the Empire wrong. The first clash. The Dreadnought surged forward through the void of space, its sleek, armored body cutting through the stars with terrifying grace. Commander Jackson stood at the front of the bridge, staring at the vast expanse ahead. The Empire's fleet loomed in the distance, its ships clustered together in tight formations. They were ready, confident, and overconfident. On the surface, everything about the Dreadnought screamed human ingenuity. It wasn't just the ship's sheer size that set it apart. It was the technology, the weapons, and the unknown power it held within. The Galactic Empire had underestimated all of it. And now, the time had come to pay the price. Jackson's fingers gripped the armrests of his chair as the countdown began. His crew, the finest Earth had to offer, stood in place, preparing for what was to come. They were about to face an overwhelming force. The odds were not in their favor, but there was a fierce resolve in every human aboard. They would not be ignored. They would not let Earth's destruction be in vain. "Lieutenant Murrah, status report," Jackson said, his voice steady despite the growing tension. Murrah's eyes flicked over the control panels. "We've locked onto the Empire's fleet. Weapons are online and ready to fire. Shields are holding steady." Jackson nodded. "All hands, brace for impact. We show them why they made a mistake underestimating us." As the Dreadnought closed in on the Empire's fleet, the alien ships grew larger, their sleek, menacing forms gleaming in the starlight. There was no turning back now. This was the moment. The Empire's mocking laughter still echoed in Jackson's mind. They thought they were unbeatable. They thought they were untouchable. But they were wrong. Without warning, the Dreadnought unleashed a blast that rattled the entire ship. The weapon wasn't flashy or over the top. It was precise, devastating. The blast hit the nearest Empire ship with unrelenting force, tearing through its shields and armor like paper. The explosion was massive, filling the vastness of space with the fiery destruction of the Empire's pride. The Empire's fleet wasn't ready for this. Their sensors scrambled to understand what had just happened. They had underestimated the Dreadnought's power, and in that moment, everything changed. "Direct hit," Lieutenant Murrah called out. "The Empire's ship is disabled, but they're retaliating." Jackson felt the tremor in the ship as the Empire fired back. The Dreadnought shook under the strain, but its shields held. The ship was designed to take hits and keep going, and that's exactly what it did. Jackson's crew didn't flinch. They worked in perfect harmony, keeping the ship steady, navigating through the firestorm as if they'd trained for this moment their entire lives. "Shields at 70%, reported Lieutenant Cole from communications. They're launching their countermeasures." "They'll need more than that," Jackson muttered under his breath. He turned back to his crew, his eyes burning with resolve. "Hit them with everything we've got." The Dreadnought's weapons roared to life again, sending out wave after wave of powerful blasts. Each strike was precise, relentless. The Empire ships were no longer laughing. Their confidence turned to panic as they struggled to defend against the human ship's devastating firepower. One by one, the Empire ships fell, their shields crumbling under the sheer force of the Dreadnought's weapons. The humans didn't back down. They didn't flinch. They pressed on, relentlessly pursuing the battle they knew had to be won. Jackson watched as another Empire ship was torn apart, its debris scattering in every direction. His crew worked in perfect synchrony, each move a reflection of their shared goal, to show the galaxy that humanity wasn't to be ignored. "Sir, incoming enemy reinforcements," Lieutenant Mara warned. Jackson's gaze hardened. "We're not done yet. Prepare for the next wave." As the Empire's reinforcements arrived, the tension only heightened. The Dreadnought had made its mark, but now they faced an even greater challenge. There were more ships, more firepower, but there was something they didn't have: the will to fight. The Dreadnought wasn't just a weapon. It was humanity's answer to all the suffering, all the loss. It was their revenge, their refusal to stay silent, to be forgotten. And as the battle raged on, the Empire realized, too late, that they had underestimated the humans. The Dreadnought wasn't just another ship. It was proof that humanity could not, and would not, be defeated. Suspense. The Empire's fleet might be large, but the Dreadnought has already taken down one of their ships. What will happen when the second wave arrives? Will the humans prevail, or will they be overwhelmed by the sheer force of the Empire's might? Only time will tell. The tides of war shift. The Dreadnought's engines roared, a constant hum of power coursing through its hull as the ship hurtled forward into the heart of the battle. The Empire's reinforcements were coming in fast, their ships cutting through the void like predators closing in on prey. But something had changed. The fear, the overconfidence that had once defined the Empire's forces, was now replaced with uncertainty. The Dreadnought had shown them the power of humanity, and they weren't prepared for it. Commander Jackson stood tall in the center of the bridge, his eyes narrowed, locked on the vast array of enemy ships ahead. His crew moved with a sense of purpose, each person completely focused on their role. The tension in the air was palpable, but Jackson had never been more sure of his crew or the ship beneath him. "Enemy reinforcements entering firing range," Lieutenant Mara called out, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. "We've got 5 ships inbound, all heavily armed." Jackson didn't blink. "We've handled worse. Hold steady." The Dreadnought's weapons were primed and ready. With one command, they could unleash another devastating volley. But Jackson knew that the first move had to be a calculated one. The humans couldn't afford to waste their firepower. Every shot had to count. "Launch countermeasures," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "I want to see how they respond." As the Dreadnought ejected its first wave of decoys and defensive drones, the Empire ships fired, their weapons lighting up the darkness of space. The humans could see the laser beams streaking toward them, but the Dreadnought's shields absorbed the blows effortlessly, holding strong as if it were no more than a flicker of light against a storm. "Correct hit," Lieutenant Cole reported, his voice calm despite the ferocity of the assault. "Shields at 60%, but we're holding." The Dreadnought wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol. It had become a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity wasn't weak, it wasn't easily broken. And the Dreadnought had the firepower to back up that message. "Prepare the main cannon," Jackson said, his voice a low growl. "It's time to show them the price of underestimating us." The crew responded instantly, every hand working with practiced precision. The ship's main cannon began to charge, its energy building as a powerful pulse of light formed at the tip of its barrel. The energy was so immense that the very air around it seemed to shimmer. Even the Empire ships took a moment to register the impending threat. "Main cannon at full charge," Mara called out. "Fire." The cannon fired with a deafening roar, sending a blast of pure destructive energy streaking toward the Empire's forces. It was like nothing the Empire had ever seen. The blast hit one of their ships dead on, and in an instant, the ship was reduced to nothing more than a cloud of debris. The shockwave rippled through the void, causing the remaining Empire ships to veer away, scrambling to regroup. For a brief moment, there was silence. The Empire's reinforcements had been wiped out in an instant, and the remaining fleet hesitated, unsure of how to respond to the devastating force they had just witnessed. "Nice shot, Commander," Lieutenant Mara said, a small grin appearing on her face. Jackson allowed himself a brief nod. It's not over yet. The Empire's remaining ships were regrouping, but there was something different now. They weren't as confident as before. The Dreadnought had proven that it wasn't just a target. It was a force of nature, a weapon designed for one purpose: to fight back. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Empire," Cole said, his voice laced with a touch of disbelief. "It's their fleet, Commander." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." The holographic image of the Empire's fleet commander flickered to life before them. The alien's face was a mix of frustration and disbelief. "Humanity," the fleet commander began, his voice cold and stern. "You have made a grave mistake. You cannot win. We have the numbers, the firepower. You cannot hope to stand against us." Jackson didn't flinch. "You've made the mistake. You thought we were weak. You thought we wouldn't fight back. But now you've seen what we're capable of." The Empire commander's eyes narrowed. "You will fall, just like the others." "We'll see about that," Jackson replied, his voice filled with determination. The transmission ended, but the message was clear. The Empire's arrogance had cost them. They thought they could destroy humanity. They thought they could wipe Earth from existence. But they had failed. "Captain, they're regrouping. They've called in even more ships," Lieutenant Mara reported. Jackson nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let them. We'll face them all." In the vastness of space, the Empire was preparing for their final push, but humanity wasn't backing down. The Dreadnought had sent a message, one that would reverberate across the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated them. And now, the tables had turned. The tide of war had shifted. Suspense. The Empire is regrouping, preparing to strike again. But the Dreadnought has already proven its power. Will humanity's resolve be enough to hold back the overwhelming force of the Empire, or will the battle continue to escalate? The galaxy is watching, and no one knows what will happen next. The Empire strikes back. The silence of space hung heavy around the Dreadnought, broken only by the hum of its powerful engines and the occasional flicker of the crew's console lights. The battle had paused, but the calm before the storm was all too evident. Commander Jackson stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes scanning the enemy fleet through the view screen. The Empire had regrouped, and they were coming with everything they had. "Enemy ships are closing in," Lieutenant Mara reported, her voice steady. But the tension in the air was palpable. "This is going to be their final push, Commander." Jackson didn't speak immediately. His mind raced through the tactical options, running simulations in his head. The Empire's forces were strong, but the Dreadnought had already proved itself as a force to be reckoned with. Yet he knew they were about to face their greatest challenge yet. "Prepare all weapons," he ordered. "No hesitation. We show them what happens when you mess with humanity." His voice was calm, but inside, his heart beat with the urgency of the moment. This wasn't just about the battle. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity would not be wiped out. They would not be crushed. On the bridge, every crew member moved with a focused intensity, their hands working in perfect sync. The hum of the Dreadnought systems grew louder as the ship's weapons came online, ready for combat. The main cannon was already charged and waiting, its power surging through the ship. But Jackson knew they couldn't rely on just one attack. The Empire had learned to avoid their earlier strike, and the next round would require more finesse. "Target their lead ships," Jackson commanded. "We'll take out their strongest first." The Dreadnought's massive cannons began to swivel, aiming at the Empire's lead ships. Jackson's eyes locked onto the screen. There were at least 10 enemy ships now, each one bristling with advanced weaponry. But they were no match for the Dreadnought in terms of firepower or technology. The question was, how long could humanity's fleet hold out against such overwhelming numbers? "Target locked," Lieutenant Cole called out. Ready to fire on your mark. Jackson's hand hovered over the console, his heart thudding in his chest. The Empire was closing in fast. If they didn't act now, the Dreadnought could be overwhelmed by sheer force. Fire. The ship shook as the main cannon unleashed its devastating energy, a beam of pure destruction that cut through the dark expanse of space. The first enemy ship exploded in a massive fireball, debris scattering in all directions. It was a clear sign to the Empire. Humanity was ready to fight back. But the Empire didn't retreat. Instead, they retaliated. Their ships opened fire, unleashing a barrage of laser beams and missile strikes aimed at the Dreadnought. The blasts hit the ship's shields with explosive force, but the shields held strong, absorbing the impact like a rock standing against a storm. Jackson could feel the ship tremble under the weight of the attack, but the Dreadnought was built for this. It could take the punishment. Shields holding at 70%, Mara reported, her eyes glued to the screen. But they're coming in hot. The Empire wasn't relenting. Their ships were coming in faster, moving like a swarm of locusts, each one determined to break through the human defenses. Jackson knew that time was running out. The longer the battle dragged on, the higher the risk that they might lose control. "We can't afford to wait," Jackson muttered, his mind already calculating their next move. "Prepare for a full barrage. We need to take out their next wave before they regroup." The crew moved with efficiency, their hands dancing across the consoles as they prepared to unleash everything the Dreadnought had. The air on the bridge was thick with anticipation. Each second felt like an eternity. "Main cannon charging," Lieutenant Cole announced. "It's ready to fire again." "Good," Jackson replied, his voice a low growl. "Hit them hard." The Dreadnought's weapons fired again, and this time, the energy was even more concentrated. The blast hit the second enemy ship square in its center, and it shattered into pieces, its massive hull breaking apart in a spectacular display of light and fire. The explosion was so intense that it sent shockwaves through space, forcing the remaining enemy ships to scatter in every direction. But there were more ships coming, and they weren't giving up. "More ships incoming," Mara called out, her voice laced with urgency. They've called in reinforcements. Jackson's heart sank as he watched the reinforcements appear on the screen. The enemy fleet was growing larger, more powerful. They weren't just trying to defeat the Dreadnought now. They were trying to wipe humanity off the map. "We need a plan now," Cole shouted, his voice rising in tension. "We'll give them a reason to fear us," Jackson said, his eyes burning with determination. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Let's show them the real power of humanity." With a flick of his wrist, Jackson gave the order. The Dreadnought began to weave and dodge, evading the incoming fire while it prepared to strike back. The battle was far from over, but the tide was beginning to shift in humanity's favor. The Empire had underestimated them. Now, they were learning the hard way that humanity was not a species to be trifled with. The final assault. The Dreadnought groaned under the pressure, its hull creaking as it absorbed the relentless onslaught from the Empire. Commander Jackson stood at the helm, sweat dripping from his brow as the ship's shields flickered and dimmed. The enemy fleet, now nearly 3 times the size it had been, was closing in. Each ship launched another volley of laser blasts, and the Dreadnought shuddered with each hit. But still, the human ship stood its ground. "Shields are holding at 50%, Lieutenant Murrah reported, her voice steady, though the stress of the battle was evident. "But they're overwhelming us with their numbers." Jackson's eyes narrowed as he studied the view screen. The Empire's ships were now surrounding the Dreadnought on all sides, their weapons locked and ready. It was clear they were preparing for a decisive strike. They would stop at nothing to destroy humanity's greatest warship. "We can't keep dodging forever," Jackson muttered to himself, his mind racing. He knew the Dreadnought could take a lot of punishment, but its resources were limited. The Empire had been relentless, and the Dreadnought's weapons were nearly at full capacity. They had to finish this now, or they would be outnumbered and outgunned. "Commander," Lieutenant Cole called out, his voice urgent. "The main cannon is ready to fire, but it'll be our last shot if we use it now." Jackson hesitated for only a moment. The decision was clear. This was their one chance. "Fire it," he ordered. The Dreadnought's main cannon flared to life once more, sending a blinding beam of pure energy hurtling toward the center of the enemy fleet. The blast ripped through space, tearing through several ships in its path. The light of the explosion was so bright that it temporarily blinded everyone on the bridge. When the light faded, the view screen revealed the devastation. The Empire's ships were in chaos, their lines broken, and several of their strongest vessels had been destroyed. But the enemy was not finished yet. "We've got more coming in from behind," Mara shouted, pointing to the sensor readings. A new wave of enemy ships, even larger than before, was charging toward them. Jackson clenched his jaw. The battle was far from over. The Dreadnought had made a powerful strike, but the Empire's determination to crush humanity seemed limitless. "Prepare the secondary weapons," he commanded. "We're not done yet." The Dreadnought's secondary cannons, smaller but just as deadly, locked onto the incoming enemy ships. With a roar, they unleashed a barrage of fire, each shot finding its mark and causing more destruction within the Empire's fleet. Ships exploded in a series of bright bursts, but the Empire's forces only seemed to grow stronger as they regrouped and came at them again. "We're running out of time," Cole warned. "Their reinforcements are arriving faster than we can take them out." Jackson knew that this would be their last stand. The Dreadnought was a symbol of humanity's resolve, but even the most powerful ship had its limits. If they didn't break the Empire's momentum soon, there would be no stopping them. But then, just as the Dreadnought prepared for another round of attacks, a new signal came through. It was faint, a small, nearly imperceptible blip on the radar, but Jackson's instincts told him this could be a game-changer. "Put that signal through," he ordered, his voice tight with urgency. The communications officer quickly relayed the message, and Jackson's eyes widened as the transmission came through. It was a transmission from Earth. "We are here," a voice crackled through the speakers. "Humanity's reinforcements are en route. Hold them off, Commander." Jackson's pulse quickened. Reinforcements. The cavalry was coming. "Thank God," he whispered under his breath. But the relief was short-lived. They still had to survive long enough for those reinforcements to arrive. "We've got a fight on our hands," Jackson said, turning to his crew. "But now we know that victory is within reach." The Dreadnought's engines roared to life as it charged forward, cutting through the enemy fleet with renewed energy. The reinforcements would be there soon. But for now, the Dreadnought and its crew would continue to battle for humanity's survival, showing the Empire just how powerful humanity could be. Reinforcements arrive. The Empire's worst nightmare. The Dreadnought was being pushed to its limits. Jackson could feel the immense weight of the battle on his shoulders, his body tense with every passing second. His hands gripped the command chair, knuckles white, as the screens around him flashed with incoming enemy fire. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of holding together, every impact sending shockwaves through the bridge. "Shields are down to 15%. Lieutenant Mara shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "If we don't do something fast, we won't survive the next wave." Jackson's gaze locked onto the view screen, his mind racing. He could see the Empire's fleet closing in, the massive ships brimming with firepower. It was almost as if they were trying to prove a point. Humanity was no match for their might. But Jackson wasn't about to let that happen. Not today. He glanced at the communication officer, his voice firm despite the chaos. "Where are the reinforcements?" The officer's eyes widened, sweat beading on his forehead. They're still a few minutes out. At least 3 light years away. 3 minutes felt like an eternity in a battle of this scale. Humanity's fate was in the hands of this single ship, and right now it looked like the Dreadnought was standing alone against a crushing enemy force. Just as Jackson prepared to issue another order, the ship's alarms blared again. The Dreadnought was hit hard. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered as the ship jolted violently. "We've lost power to the secondary weapons," Cole called out, his voice strained with the effort to keep the Dreadnought operational. "We're almost out of options." Jackson's heart pounded in his chest. His crew was giving everything they had, but the Empire's fleet was relentless, and they were running out of time. Then, without warning, a massive shadow appeared on the edges of the battlefield. A fleet of ships, human ships. It was the reinforcements, and they were here at last. "Commander, the reinforcements have arrived." The communications officer's voice rang out with a mix of disbelief and joy. Jackson's eyes widened, relief flooding his veins. But there was no time to waste. He quickly issued the order, his voice sharp. "All ships, engage the enemy. Now." With a roar, the reinforcements dove into the fray. The new fleet of human ships, sleek and powerful, moved with precision and grace. They unleashed a barrage of firepower, targeting the Empire's ships with deadly accuracy. Each shot struck with the force of a thunderclap, tearing through the Empire's ranks like a scythe through wheat. The tides of battle began to shift as the Empire found themselves outmatched, their once mighty fleet now crumbling under the weight of humanity's combined strength. The Dreadnought, bolstered by the arrival of its allies, surged forward once more. Its weapons flared to life, and Jackson could feel the ship vibrate as it fired at the Empire's command ship, sending it into a chaotic spiral. The Empire's fleet was faltering, their formation shattered, their confidence evaporating. "We've broken their line," Cole shouted, his voice full of astonishment. "They're retreating." Jackson's lips curled into a grim smile, but he didn't let himself feel too much relief just yet. The Empire might have been on the defensive, but they would never give up easily. "Don't let them regroup," Jackson ordered. "We finish this now." The battle was far from over. But with the arrival of humanity's reinforcements, the Empire was facing a foe it never expected. A united humanity, fighting with everything they had, determined to take back what had been stolen from them. The Dreadnought led the charge, its cannon firing again and again, taking out one ship after another. The Empire's fleet, once an unstoppable force, was now crumbling under the weight of humanity's fury. But as the last of the Empire's ships began to retreat, Jackson knew this wasn't just a victory. It was a message. A message to the Empire that humanity would not be broken, that they were capable of incredible strength, and that they would never forget the price of their arrogance. The battle raged on, but the Galactic Empire had learned the hard way. Humanity had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. The Empire's last stand. Humanity strikes back. The battle had turned. What was once a hopeless fight against overwhelming odds was now a story of humanity's determination, strength, and unity. The Empire's once proud fleet was now scattered and broken, retreating in disarray. But their pride had not yet been fully crushed. Jackson stood tall in the command chair of the Dreadnought, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The remnants of the Empire's fleet were fleeing towards the distant edge of the star system. But Jackson could feel the tension in the air. This wasn't over yet. The Empire might be retreating now, but they weren't the type to give up easily. "We've won the battle, but not the war," Jackson muttered to himself. "They're still out there, waiting." "Commander," Lieutenant Mara's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've detected a large concentration of enemy ships, regrouping on the far side of the system. They're preparing for another assault." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. They had been ready for this. But even with their reinforcements, the enemy still had enough power to mount another full-scale attack. The Empire's pride would not let them retreat in defeat. Not now. "We'll meet them head-on," Jackson said, his voice unwavering. "All ships, prepare for another assault. We're not giving them a chance to regroup." A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the bridge as the Dreadnought and its fleet turned toward the enemy, ready for the final confrontation. This time, it was not just about survival. This time, it was personal. Humanity had been underestimated for too long, and the Empire had made a grave mistake by believing they could simply wipe them out. As the human fleet charged into the fray, Jackson's thoughts raced. His crew, his people, they had all given so much. They were fighting for their survival, but more importantly, they were fighting for a future where humanity was no longer a target, but a force to be reckoned with. The Empire's ships were already moving into position, trying to form a defensive perimeter. But the Dreadnought and its fleet were faster, more agile. Humanity had learned from their previous battles, and they weren't going to make the same mistakes. They knew how to adapt, how to outthink their enemies. The Dreadnought opened fire, its powerful cannons sending shockwaves through space. Each shot was a statement, a warning that humanity would not back down. The Empire's ships fired back, but their attacks were desperate, no longer with the precision they once had. The cracks in their defenses were showing, and it was clear to Jackson that the end was near. "Look at them," Cole, the tactical officer, said in awe. "They're disorganized. They're falling apart." But Jackson didn't let himself get distracted by the sight of their enemy's retreat. He knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down, not when the final blow was just within reach. The human fleet pressed on, relentlessly pushing the Empire's forces back. The enemy's ships were getting smaller and smaller on the screen, their once formidable fleet reduced to a few scattered vessels. And still, the Dreadnought advanced, its guns still firing, its engines roaring with power. Then, just as victory seemed within grasp, the Empire made its last, desperate move. A massive battleship, far larger than anything the Empire had fielded before, appeared from behind a cluster of asteroids. It was the flagship of the Empire, a behemoth designed for one thing: to crush all who dared to defy the Empire's rule. And it was heading straight for the Dreadnought. "Commander, we got a problem," Mara shouted, her voice urgent. "The Empire's flagship is entering the battlefield. It's massive. It's their last hope." Jackson's jaw clenched. He had known the Empire wouldn't go down without a fight. But this was personal. They had sent their biggest ship, their final weapon, to take down humanity once and for all. But Jackson wasn't about to let that happen. Not today. "All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship," Jackson ordered, his voice filled with resolve. "This is it. We finish this now." The battle raged around them as the human fleet focused all their firepower on the Empire's flagship. The massive ship fought back, its cannons launching devastating shots at the human fleet. But it was slow, cumbersome, outmatched by the agility and precision of humanity's ships. The flagship was taking heavy damage, its hull buckling under the relentless barrage. And then, with a final, deafening roar, the Dreadnought fired its last shot. The energy blast struck the flagship square in its core, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then the flagship exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The remnants of the Empire's fleet scattered, their morale shattered beyond repair. Victory. The Empire had been defeated, and humanity had proven that they would no longer be a footnote in the galaxy's history. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the Galactic Empire would never forget the price of underestimating them. Jackson stood, staring at the aftermath on the view screen. He knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had been shaken by humanity's might, and there was no telling what would come next. But one thing was certain. Humanity had claimed its place in the stars, and the Empire had learned, the hard way, that they were not to be trifled with.